Hey, it's Jordan with Status Coup. Jill Stein has entered the 2024 presidential race seeking the Green Party nomination. Of course, the response from the corporate media is to mock her with Russiagate and propaganda. And President Biden seems to be doing his best FDR impersonation. Let's start with Jill Stein's announcement. This was made yesterday that she will once again seek the Green Party nomination. Remember, she was supporting Cornel West when he was running as a Green Party candidate, but Cornel West then moved over to running as an independent. Let's take a listen.
People are tired of being thrown under the bus by wealthy elites and their bought politicians. Tired of living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to pay the rent, locked in student debt and medical debt, child poverty doubling, rising diseases of despair, growing hopelessness. The political system is broken. The two Wall Street parties are bought and paid for. Over 60% of us now say the bipartisan establishment's failed us, and we need a party that serves the people. I'm Jill Stein, and I'm running for president to offer that choice for the people outside of the failed two-party system. We'll put solutions to the crises we face, crushing inequality, endless war, and climate collapse. And we'll put these front and center in this election and on the ballot across the country. The ruling parties that got us into this mess aren't getting us out. Both parties are squandering trillions on the endless war machine, fueling conflict around the world, while tens of millions here at home lack food, housing, healthcare. Democrats have betrayed their promises for working people, youth, and the climate again and again, while Republicans don't even make such promises in the first place. And both parties are a danger to our democracy, expanding censorship, criminalizing protest, throwing competitors off the ballot, suppressing debates,
American people who've been systematically locked out of these debates,
rigging their primaries. So forget the pundits and the attack dogs who tell you to ignore your misery and just keep voting for those who caused it in the first place. Change won't come from the ruling elites. It comes from we, the people. And when we stand together, we can create living wage jobs for all Americans. We can guarantee an economic bill of rights with the right to a job, to health care, to housing.
So that goes on a little longer. She has it at the top of her Twitter. I'll tell you, putting aside politics, if a message like this got equal and fair airtime to the endless coverage of Biden and Trump and, you know, corporate Democrats like Dean Phillips, who all of a sudden, the Minnesota congressman, the media is covering his vanity race in the Democratic primary. If that kind of message got any airtime, particularly in front of young people, non-voters, oppressed groups, indigenous, black, brown, be a popular message, I think, particularly when you have polls showing nearly 60% of Americans are open to a third-party candidate. That is why traditionally the media has blacked out candidates like Jill Stein or Cornel West, called them not credible, unserious, spoilers. And in response to Mayor Jill Stein's announcement, not surprisingly, Morning Joe, unsurprisingly, mocked her. Let's take a listen.
There's two issues here, though, right? Because I agree with both of you. If you have viable...
What are you, Harold Ford Jr.?
If you have viable third-party candidates...
Right.
And I don't know if they're viable, but if you, I mean, RFK in these polls is taking what, 20%? That's like.
But he's taking more from Trump.
Yeah.
Now you get, let's say you get
Jill Stein's talking about coming
Jill
in.
Stein, and not really my aunt, in there. Then let's say you get a new no labels candidate. We saw.
Can I ask you, is Jill Stein going to be speaking in Russian or in English in this campaign?
If it gets her the 0.5%, does it really matter?
So that was the first mocking of Jill Stein, who is a very, very educated, impressive woman, got on almost every ballot, I believe, in 2016, and, you know, might Sure, Cornel West is in the race, RFK also. So you would expect votes to be split up. We'll talk about that in a bit. But there's never been any evidence that she's some Russian stooge or paid by Russia. This is, of course, just distraction and propaganda by the corporate media to try and feed their predominant audience, which is older Americans who are very susceptible to that Russiagate, Russia as the boogeyman, Cold War propaganda. But then Morning Joe did another line of propaganda, this from Hillary Clinton's past campaign manager, past campaign spokesperson, Jennifer Palmieri. Let's take a listen to this nonsense.
The problem, Jen, is there are going to be a lot of alternatives, most of them Democrats, RFK Jr., who actually is taking from Trump, it looks like, more right now, but also Jill Stein talking about jumping in for the Green Party, and now Joe Manchin talking about the possibility of a no labels ticket, or let's just say a lot of people talking about the possibility of Joe Manchin on no labels. Yeah, so, I mean, you know, and Stein, just to remind everybody, Jill Stein cost Hillary Clinton Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So these things matter. Yeah,
let's just remind people that's bullshit. Jill Stein did not cost Hillary Clinton Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. The data shows that actually, even if Jill Stein were not in the race, Hillary Clinton was going to lose 2 out of the 3 states because she would have basically tied, which tie does not go to the runner in baseball terms. When it comes to politics, Donald Trump would have still won. But also, this is a lazy kind of form of propaganda that presumes if Jill Stein did not run in 2016, all of her votes in those states would have went to Hillary Clinton, when if you polled, and there was surveys done of Jill Stein voters, most of them said if she wasn't an option, they just wouldn't have voted. So this whole Jill Stein cost Hillary Clinton. No, Hillary Clinton cost Hillary Clinton because most of those Stein voters said, yeah, we weren't going to vote if Stein wasn't an option. Not that, yeah, we would have voted for Hillary. So again, it's just propaganda meant to discredit, demean third-party candidates like Jill Stein. They've tried similar things with Cornel West. But at the end of the day, none of these pundits seem to want to address the real issue here, which is, why is Biden down so much to a 4-time indicted, disgraced former president who, even if he got rid of the indictments, didn't do such a good job as president? Most people, most of his supporters think they did because they just remember a time before inflation. So they think, oh, you know, things were good under Trump. No, they weren't. We were still, the masses of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. You still had most people, so many people working more than one job, rising healthcare costs, gentrification, housing costs soaring. Things were not just dandy under Trump. But under Biden, he ran on, let's get rid of Trump, but build back better. I'm going to give you a $15 minimum wage. Abandon that right away. Public option. Abandon that right away. Stop drilling on public lands. Has doubled drilling on public lands. $2,000 checks. Yeah. How'd those work out? Didn't happen. Go down the list. He's basically continued Trump's policies on the border, on trying to backdoor privatize Medicare. As the climate inferno intensifies, his brave announcement was increased cooling centers for the elderly and, you know, essentially more research instead of a climate emergency being declared. And then you have right now, he is basically looking the other way as Israel slaughters and commits genocide in Gaza, which is probably, if he loses Michigan by a narrow amount, you could look to that, because Michigan has some of the highest population of Muslims in America, particularly in places like Dearborn and Detroit. And their support of the president is nosediving right now due to his policy of support for Israel and what Israel, the heinous slaughter and carpet bombing of Gaza that has killed, at this point, we don't know the full numbers, but at least over 10,000 innocent civilians in Gaza. So they don't seem to want to address that. It's the same bullshit they keep spewing. Oh, it's a messaging issue. He needs to get out there and, really brag about his accomplishments, the accomplishments of for a year lowering poverty in America, the whole, child tax credit, which was a good thing. Unfortunately, he didn't fight to extend it after Manchin, who has now announced he's not running for Senate again, after Manchin and Sinema killed the extension of the child tax credit. Biden wouldn't fight them on it. He wouldn't lift a finger. He wouldn't use the bully pulpit of the presidency to fight for that policy, which, if it would have been extended, I would argue his polls would be doing a little better right now, because that's a tangible thing that people could look at as we're getting a couple $100 a month if you're a low-income family from President Biden. He didn't fight for that. He didn't fight them on killing the filibuster because he believes in the filibuster. So many things he didn't fight for. And he has himself to blame, because I think pretty much any other Democrat with a pulse other than Biden and Harris probably would be leading Trump right now. And I want to show you, because, again, they don't want to address these facts. Instead, they want to continue pushing their propaganda for Joe Biden. I mean, this part was amazing. This is another absurd piece of propaganda from the MSDNC. Listen to Joe Scarborough fawn over a speech Joe Biden gave yesterday. Biden gave this speech from a UAW event where he wore a red UAW shirt. Actually, let me show you that UAW Biden speech first.
That also means, let's think about this. When my predecessor, the distinguished, anyway. When my predecessor was in office, 6 factories closed across the country. Tens of thousands of auto jobs were lost nationwide. And on top of that, he was willing to cede the future of electric vehicles to China. He said if America invested in electric vehicles, it would drive down wages. It would destroy jobs. It would spell the end of the American automobile industry. Well, like almost everything else he said, he's wrong. And you have proved him wrong. Instead of lower wages, you want record gains. Instead of fewer jobs, you want a commitment for thousands of more jobs. Instead of less involvement and investment, you encourage American automakers to invest $40 billion in American auto industry beginning now. $40 billion. And then we're going to shut down. Remember my other guy?
So there's Biden doing his best Union Man Joe impersonation, putting on the red UAW shirt. Listen, I don't blame the UAW for having him. I don't blame Biden for pretending to be a union man. It's good politics. The problem is he's not. Credit to him for showing up during the strike, first president to ever do that. But he's not responsible for the gains the UAW made. Sean Fain, union leadership, and the workers are. And by his policies, he has not been pro-labor or a champion of labor. If he was, why isn't he pushing very hard as a campaign promise the PRO Act? Why isn't he as president? Why didn't he push that? Why didn't he fight for it, which would be a huge gain for organized labor, the PRO Act? He was a major proponent of the TPP, which would have been the final nail in the death of organized labor, in the coffin of organized labor. If he was such a big proponent of organized labor, he'd be supporting Medicare for all, which would give universal health care and take that off the bargaining table, because workers would have health care. So the unions wouldn't have to negotiate for health care. They could focus on wages and other benefits. So it's one thing to show up and wear your red little outfit supporting the UAW. It's another thing to support them in policy, more so than your rhetoric. But let's take a listen. Joe Scarborough was just slobbering, absolutely slobbering over President Biden's UAW speech.
Part 2, this election is won in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. He just keeps hammering on manufacturing. He just keeps hammering on jobs. He just keeps hammering. And, you know, he's doing things that actually Obama and Clinton and other Democrats didn't do. He's not a new Democrat. He's not. Right. The new Democrats, by the way, have bled all that support away. He's an FDR Democrat, and he's reconnecting with that incredibly important strand of Democratic politics, and I think it's paying off.
He's an FDR Democrat? Oh, boy. Does Joe Scarborough need a history lesson? Yeah, well, FDR kind of did big things, whereas Biden gave every excuse for why we could only do small things. At least FDR even tried. Biden did not. Spare me the bullshit. So, listen, polls are pretty bad for Biden right now, with Jill Stein jumping in alongside Cornel West. You have RFK. I think RFK is more so taking votes from Trump. I think Cornel West and Jill Stein combined in the general election, particularly in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I don't want to say cancel each other out, but because they're both in, will probably, take from each other. So at the end of the day, Biden could point to RFK, Jill Stein, Cornel West, possibly Manchin jumping in a corporate no labels candidacy. But if he loses, I don't think it's going to be because these candidates, Cornel West, Jill Stein, took away from him. I think it's because their voters chose not to vote for him in the first place. And third-party voters, even if those third-party candidates didn't run, would not vote for Joe Biden, because he's been the polar opposite of FDR.